Good afternoon, everyone. Delighted to welcome you to this workshop organized by WEgate on how to get the most out of your investors. I'm delighted to have Mary McKenna here today. Welcome on this workshop, Mary.
Thanks, Claire.
Before starting, just a few housekeeping issues. This session is recorded, so you will be able to see it later. If you have any questions while Mary and I are exchanging or Mary is presenting, please don't hesitate to put your questions or comments or resources in the chat. As you think of your comments or questions, you don't need to wait until the end. So please do that as you go. And meanwhile, just make sure to have your mic off, although your camera can be on because we're a small group, so it's actually nicer to see the faces of everyone. So good afternoon and welcome again. My name is Claire Monk. I am the CEO of a Belgian-based business angel group called Be Angels. It's a 20-year-old business angel group, actually. In 2012, I started a women business angels group, which is now fully integrated into Be Angels. And I am also a board member of Business Angels Europe, relating to international relations and helping connections for business angel groups across Europe and worldwide. So Mary, good afternoon. Could you please introduce yourself for the audience?
Thanks, Claire. Yes. Hi, everybody. Really nice to be here. Thank you, WEgate, for including me in your summit. And of course, community is one of the key supports that exists for female founders. So it's also great to see a couple of other Irish women on the call here who are organisers of female communities. So welcome, Paula. Welcome, Sinead. Should I just kick on in here, Claire?
Yes, please, Mary. Tell us about your experience as an entrepreneur, how you came to angel investing, and yes, a little bit your background.
Okay, I'll scamper through this fairly quickly and try and cover it off as fast as we can, because we have a lot to get through here this afternoon, ladies. So I am an Irish technology entrepreneur. I wasn't born that way, and I didn't start my first business until I was 43 years old. And I mentioned that in case anyone in our audience today is thinking that age is a barrier to being a startup founder, and it absolutely isn't. No. So before that, I had a pretty regular career working in the City of London as finance director, pretty sort of traditional. But when I turned 40, I decided that I would take control and make some changes in my life. So one of the things that I did was we moved from London back to Ireland, and I found a new job as a CFO of a Belfast-based semiconductor startup, which was venture funded and was a spin out from Queen's University in Belfast. And it had its sales and marketing function was based in Silicon Valley in California. So 3 weeks into my new job, I found that I had switched from being a very traditional City of London finance director to being somebody that was now spending 1 week in 4 in California in Silicon Valley, right in the middle of the last dot-com bubble. So it was an exciting place to be. And over the next 3 years working in that company, I found that I actually preferred sales to finance. And so I switched, I jumped across from one career path to another. And eventually, in 2006, I co-founded an e-learning startup here in Ireland. The timing was really right. We were one of the first sharing economy startups, and we built a community and we quickly scaled. And I operated as the company's chief exec for 7 years, grew the team to 100 people, and the online user base grew to over 1 million learners. I sold my company in 2014 and I moved into early stage angel investment. One of the reasons was that I wanted to immerse myself back into the startup ecosystem. I'd kind of missed the excitement and the chaos that goes along with startup life as my own business scaled. But I was also very driven to want to help female founders, just because I'd seen from my own perspective how difficult it really was to get started and to grow a business. And so fast forward a little bit from 2014 to now, I have made 10 early stage investments. It's been a journey, but these days I very much only invest in female founding teams with a tech for good product and something that operates in a space in which I can add significant value to with either my own network or my own experience. And that's quite important to me. And if I'm truthful, my experience of angel investment has been, and I think maybe you hopefully would agree with this, Claire, it's been fairly patchy. Some of my portfolio companies are doing really well. Others haven't done so well. And with a couple of them out of the 10, the founding teams did actually go on to behave quite badly towards their investors, and I'm no longer in regular contact with them. Others have been an absolute joy to work with, and we've become great friends. So for today's topic, I've been on a few different sides of this particular fence, if you can be on more than two sides of a fence. You know, I've worked 20 years ago as a CFO in a venture funded company where I've been responsible for all that mechanical communication that happens with investors and venture partners. I've been an angel investor where I've actually been first money in very, very early doors and worked with first-time entrepreneurs, and that's very special. I've been a lead investor where my job really is to act as the bridge between the company and the other private investors and keep everybody up in the loop of what's happening. And I've done a few investments where I am just an investor. I don't attend board meetings, and I just get the regular occasional information that everybody gets. You know, so that's kind of brought me up to starting on the topic, I think, Claire.
Yes, thank you, Mary. Maybe for those of us who've been on the previous workshop with Florence, but quick questions. Out of your 10 investments, have you made some outside of Ireland? Just
Yes, I have. Yes, I invest in Ireland, in the UK, and across the EU. One of my investments is actually in Norway. So you know, I would have quite a geographical spread there. You know? Yes. And yes, I should have said as well, anybody that was in Florence's earlier workshop, there'll be a lot of the things that Florence said that will resonate with what I'm going to say today. And there's a lot of crossover between the topics that both of us are covering here today.
Yes, so starting now with the topic, I think, Mary, you would agree, this is quite actually a rare topic. I think when we were preparing this session, I think I was really excited actually to talk about this topic with another investor, which is, you know, investor-entrepreneur relationships, basically. So there are quite a lot of sessions about how do you meet investors, how do you prepare to meet your investors, but then once actually they've invested, what happens? So we'll cover a few items with you, Mary, about, you know, before the investment, while the investment is occurring, maybe a little bit, what happens after the exits. And I think you've prepared some very nice tips and tricks or do's and don'ts in terms of investor-entrepreneur relationship. So that's great. And we'll focus on early stage investment. I think you also mentioned in the introduction that one of your motivations to become an angel investor was to really, you know, become integrated into the early stage investment ecosystem. We'll focus on that because I think there could be nuances in the investor-entrepreneur relationships for future stages of development. But right now we're going to focus on meeting early stage, usually angel investors, and we're going to focus also on value beyond cash, as you like to put it, Mary, which is really, you know, angel investors doing their part. So their motivation is not only to invest and become a shareholder, but they also want to add value. And I think that motivation of wanting to have an active role, not operational but strategic, will also come out during this discussion. So maybe Mary, let's start by how relationships began with investors before they actually invest. So how do you make sure that investment is the right thing for you?
Yeah, that's a really good place to start, Claire. Thank you. So, I mean, I think the first thing to say is that your relationship with your eventual investors is likely to start long before they actually open their checkbook and invest in your company. I think it is good to first of all think about whether or not investment is right for you. It isn't right for everybody, and it isn't right for every company. And I think when Florence was talking there about valuations, that's another good way of thinking about it. You know, if you don't need the money, you really probably shouldn't be taking it, because you're giving part of your company away. And having said that, as an aside, I actually did bootstrap my business. So, you know, we just got to revenue at lightning speed and became profitable quickly because we could. It was an online learning business. And so, you know, with some businesses, you can do that. With some businesses, you really can't, and you need to raise. I think the other thing that we talked about the other day as well, Claire, is we think that early stage money is becoming more scarce, and that founders really do have to work a bit harder these days to attract the right sorts of investors. So, you know, having a nice pitch deck and a good, you know, a good idea and bowling up there and delivering a good pitch is probably not sufficient anymore. You are competing, and you really do need to work a bit harder at this. And the other thing to say, it may well take longer than you think it will. I think Florence mentioned 6 months being a good sort of rule of thumb to use. So, I mean, you know, it's like everything in life. You begin by drawing up your list of potential suitable investors, and you start to build relationships with that large group. And you do that alongside finessing your product or your idea until it's at the stage when it's actually investable. And this process, I think it's worth saying, can be quite opaque to first-time founders. And it's an area where many people do get this wrong. They try to hurry things along too quickly. They send you an email cold out of the blue from people you've never met, asking you to read their pitch deck and send them a check. You know, it can be as extreme as that. So there's a little tip to keep in mind here, actually, that someone told me a long time ago. When you want money, ask for advice. When you want advice, ask for money. So keep that in mind. Nobody likes getting asked for money outright, but they don't mind being asked for advice. And that's a way to sort of start building your relationship and building that network. This, and Florence said this as well, this is an incredibly time-consuming process, and it will suck maybe 2 or 3 days out of your working week. So you need to be aware of this before you start, and you need to have a strategy in place for keeping your business as usual ticking along. You know? So we go along there, we build trust too, which is very hard to hurry, and sooner or later your investment will happen. So some of that big network that you've created become investors, and the others slide into a new category, which are prospects for a later round. You need to keep that in mind, and you need to keep those people engaged and interested as well, because the timing, it's all about timing for the person that's investing, and it's all about timing in terms of their relationship with the company too. So there's an Irish investor actually called Devon Hughes, and he raised €8 million earlier this summer. And I heard him say that he probably already knows the investors that will invest in his future round, maybe 5 years down the road from here, because he'll have been talking to them for a long time. So I hope that I'm getting that across to you, that this is really, you know, it's a time-consuming and labor-intensive process.
I think, Mary, also you mentioned building trust, and I think this is going to be really important as well when so that's for what we call the due diligence part as well. So when the investors are looking at your business, you need to build trust, and because that is going to really be the foundation for how well things are going to work once you have invested. I think transparency is important as well. And you mentioned timing. Florence mentioned earlier in her workshop, how many business plans do angel investors receive? So it's important also for entrepreneurs to understand that there's a momentum, right? There's this timing that you need to keep with investors because they are busy, because they receive a lot of information, and responding in a timely manner to questions from investors, sending the information, building that trust. So we always give as an example, when you mentioned that you have contracts signed, well, they need to be signed. There shouldn't be emails of people that indicate that they have an interest, right? So this is all part of this prior to the investment, making sure that whatever you say is reliable and that you really have that type of quality connection with your investors, right?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned due diligence there as well, Claire. And I mean, one of the smart things that anybody who's starting a business today should do is they should, get their data room going from day one and start populating that with the information that their investors, when they get around to talking to them about this, are going to want to see, so that they don't have to start doing it at a time when, maybe time is very short and they're really starting to panic. So do some of those tasks in advance so that you don't leave yourself on the back foot. I thought we'd just pause for a second here, Claire, and just go over a couple of golden rules around how the communications and the building that relationship should happen. So
I think you've prepared a few.
Yeah, I'm not 2 minutes and we'll go on to the slides. Yeah, I've got a couple of little bits just to go through here. I mean, the first tip that I would give you is anybody that is thinking of raising, you should do as much due diligence on your potential investors as they're going to do on you. This is really key. You should talk to the other companies that they've invested in and the other founders. You should remember that investors are people and they're all different. And it can be a little bit like herding cats. Some are formal, some are more casual in their approach. Some people are very busy. Other people have some more time that they can give you. I should just say as well that difference between having a lot of time and not having a lot of time doesn't always map onto the investors that you would actually like to have more time. It's usually the good ones that don't have much time. And remember that you are going to want to ask these people for more money in the future, and you're going to want them to introduce you to their investor friends, because you probably will have more rounds and you may even have more businesses further down the line. Other tips would be to be honest, back to what Florence talked about in terms of authenticity. So be honest, do the right thing. Remember that the investment world is small and people do all talk to each other. And remember that business, like life, is a repeat game. People and things constantly come back round. And something that we talked about the other day as well, Claire, was recognizing that there is opportunity in your investors. You've worked really hard to bring them on board and attract them in. So engaging positively with them will benefit your company. And to not do that is a real missed opportunity. So I'm just going to share some slides here that I've prepared earlier, just to give a little bit of structure to this next part.
So Mary, I'm trying to ask the organizers to give me sharing rights, because actually it's been disabled for me. So can you maybe try on your end to see if it works? Otherwise, if the team from WEgate could just give me co-hosting rights, please, so that I can share the slides. Okay, that works, Mary. If you can put them maybe.
Can you see that?
Yes, that's fine. If you can maybe put this full screen. And we are on the second slide. And you're done. Yes, perfect.
Where do I put this onto full screen? Sorry, folks, I'm not prepared to do this.
Bottom right. Third one. No, not this one. The third one with a little, how do you call it? So if you move your mouse to the next one on the right, and then again the next one.
I'm sorry, Claire, I can't actually.
But I think this is fine, Mary. I think
how to do this at all.
Don't worry. I think we can read perfectly well. So even though it's not in full screen, so why don't you go ahead, Mary, and then that's fine. That's full screen. And we are on the good practice do's, don'ts now.
Sorry.
Yes, that would be the
Okay,
first.
is this
Yes,
okay?
thank you. Yes.
So I'm not going to read these out. Everybody can see what that's, what I've written up there, but it will depend on the types of investors that you have brought in. But these are just some of the things that you could expect them to perhaps help you with. And as you can see, there's a lot of and they will expect you to come to them for some sorts of these types of help. And I was just going to mention a story about one of the companies that I invested in, and I invested I was the first money in, and it was very, very early. And at the time, the team was 2 founders and 2 techies, and the founders were first-time entrepreneurs. And in that first 18 months that I was their investor, these are the things that I helped them with. I helped them recruit the next part of their team. I helped them raise their seed round. I helped them interview accountancy firms. I recommended a lawyer to them, who is the lawyer that they still use to this day. I helped them build their public profile, and I amplified them across my network. I even went to strategic sales meetings with them for the first year, probably, that they were trading. More recently, I've sourced a new chairman for them from my network. And in August this year, I resigned as a board member and withdrew because they have now moved on to a completely different place in their growth journey. And they need different sorts of people now, and they don't need somebody like me anymore. So I've stepped back. And that's kind of, I think, they're 4 years in, and that's sort of how it works. So you can expect maybe investors to be more prominent at certain times, and then perhaps to just sort of disappear a little as well. And then, Claire, the other day we discussed some good practice do's and good practice don'ts. A lot of this is about communication. Regular communication. Don't make your investors feel like a sort of a rich relative that you only call when you need some money. That would be really terrible. And then for people that you don't speak to regularly, I guess there'll be a set format of information that they want. The types of things that you would include would be the business progress, important or any new facts, any changes, maybe your financial summary. You may even wish to create a Dropbox and put this information in there and give your investors permission to just go and look at that themselves. Along the communications, you might start with email, but some might prefer phone calls, and they'll let you do that. They'll let you know which way they want to communicate with you. And perhaps you may want to book one-to-one time with your investors. Tell them in advance what it is that you want to talk to them about, if it's help that you need. And the benefit, I suppose, of sending out your board packs in advance and always sticking to your board meeting dates is that you really do build trust that way, something that we talked about at length the other day, Claire, this one. But also, it means that your investors and your directors show up to your board meetings having read all of the business that they're supposed to have prepared for. And then you can actually spend that very precious time that people don't have much of working on your strategy and working on things that you really need to discuss. And then no surprises. That's a big one. Investors never want to get any bad shocks when they come to a board meeting and you present that to them. I think something that we talked about the other day as well, Claire, was that just to sort of remember that if you have have an open and transparent culture in your business and in the way that you conduct your communications with your investors, because if you don't, it opens the door to doubts, and then doubts can soon grow into suspicion. And the next thing that you know, you've got 10 pairs of eyes that are watching your every move, and that is not a good place to be. So the don'ts, these are short. Don't break any of the rules on the previous slide, obviously. I think maybe we'll just talk briefly about when things don't go well. I mean, your investors are likely to be entrepreneurs themselves, and they're not going to expect everything to go right. Pivots happen all the time in early stage businesses. You know, I mean, you think about the year that we've just had or that we're still in, markets change, circumstances change, customers don't buy as quickly as you think that they're going to, and you need to do a little pivot or you need to make a few changes here and there. Some of your investors might not be happy when you do that, but I can promise you that if you've got a good relationship with them, it's going to go an awful lot better than if you don't and you haven't built that trust. And I suppose the last thing that I was going to just touch on, Claire, was about after you exit, you know, you have gone to all that effort of building a fabulous network of people and investors, and you know, you should probably really maintain that, because if you go again with another startup, another business, it'll be a whole lot easier because everybody will be sitting there ready to go. That's what I have for you. Oh, and I will just type my details up in the chat there in case anybody would like to contact me.
Thank you, Mary, for sharing your experience and very, very precious insights on the different stages of connecting with your investors as an entrepreneur. So before you actually get investment, once you have received investment and you need to connect to your board members, and then once they have exited your company. I already have a first question in the chat, Mary, about the position of the chairman of the board. What is your position concerning the chairman position in pre-seed and seed rounds? What is your experience?
Yeah, I mean, often it's very useful to have a chair who is who's got deep domain expertise of the area that you're working in. Because it will open so many doors, and it will bring, you know, if you have if your chairman is a respected person from your industry and they're going along or they're opening doors for you, it really adds credibility and gravitas to an early stage company. Would you agree with that, Claire?
Sure. So, you know, it wouldn't be any of the founding team members who would take on that position. It would be an investor.
It's unlikely. Yeah.
I think it's important, because I think that's a question that at least I see a lot of entrepreneurs have is, you know, from which pool of investors should we appoint that chairman position? But I think
it's a tricky thing to do, actually. It's difficult to find, and if you're a first-time investor and you maybe don't have a fantastic network, it is really difficult to source a person to be a decent chair. And without wishing to offend any of the boards that I've worked on, sometimes the first chair that they have is kind of a temporary person while they do look for somebody who's going to be more suitable.
Mm-hmm. But sometimes the chair, and maybe as you say, in the first stages of development, is also an intermediary between the entrepreneurs and the board. When
yes.
we prepared this session, Mary, we also discussed about the fact that more often than not, entrepreneurs, especially if they're young entrepreneurs and it's the first time they're raising capital, they just don't know how to organize a board. They don't know, or they forget about, you know, things they committed to. And couldn't the president of the board or that chairman, you know, help to remind the entrepreneurs, help the entrepreneurs to prepare their boards? Maybe that's the role at the beginning that they can play.
Yeah, I mean, you often do see as well with first-time entrepreneurs, they don't even really know what they should include in the board pack or what format. They probably don't come from a finance background. They don't know what format the board's going to want to see the financials presented in. And that can be a source of a bit of tension maybe for the first few months that a board is running. You know, you will sort of see investors constantly asking for the format to be changed, or to be receiving different KPIs, or to have different, you know, for the team to be measuring some different things. And it does cause, I think it causes the founders a lot of stress.
So that should be really agreed.
Yeah.
So it should be agreed from the beginning, and the chairman can help in rationalizing the request and making sure that it meets the investors' demand, but that it's not too demanding on the entrepreneurs and it doesn't change every couple of weeks.
Yeah, that's the other thing, isn't it, really, is that you don't want to, as an investor, the last thing that you want to do is burden your founders with spending all of their time creating information for you. I mean, that would be, you know, that's a real schoolboy error, that one. You know, you want to make it as easy as you can for them to share their information with you in a format that you want to receive it, which is at the right level of detail and not, not the minutiae of the business and everything else.
Great. So we have a lot of questions in the chat, which is great.
Thanks.
Another question is how best to respond to investors who don't fully treat the invested teams as authentic, but rather as employees. So I mean, really, I think it's about handling the relationship and probably having a balanced relationship between the investors and the founders. Can you talk a little bit?
Claire, I would also say that is one of the roles of the chairman, actually, is to keep the board members as non-execs and not to allow them to cross over and start interfering in the executive team's running of the business. That can be very, very distracting for a founding team, and it's not helpful at all when that happens. You sometimes see it with very people that are first-time entrepreneurs and are perhaps not really, maybe they've never participated in this sort of structure before, and they perhaps get out of their depth, and they allow the investors to start coming in and performing really things that they should be doing themselves. I told a story about how I did this with some early stage founders, but I was very careful that my role was mentoring and coaching. It wasn't that I was going to be doing that forever, or that I wanted to get paid for it, or that, it's different. I was just helping them to find their feet, and then I wanted to stop doing it.
I think that we also, I think this is something that we covered and that you mentioned, Mary, in the beginning about, making sure that you can choose your investors. And I know that as an angel group, for example, when we train new angel investors, we'll always say, one of the pitfalls of the would-be angel is to try to become CEO in lieu of the CEO. So that's exactly what you want to avoid. So I think, having balanced relationship with your investors is something that should probably be verified before they actually on board as shareholders, but maybe, check the dynamics and this respect that the investors will have for the entrepreneurs and vice versa before the investment is made, right?
I think so, Claire. I mean, I can honestly remember working with a founder in a company that I was going to invest in, and we'd been talking for maybe 6 or 8 months, and we were getting close to investing. And there was another potential investor in the mix, and every week he sent the founder a list of very detailed questions. And the straw that eventually broke the donkey's back was he sent her 24 questions on Christmas Eve. Oh. And I had a call with her over the Christmas holidays, and I just said to her, and she wanted his money. She was, he was putting money in and she wanted the money. And she had to make a call as to whether or not she was going to be able to deal with that level of scrutiny and that level of detail going forward. And she decided to politely say to him, I really don't think there's a good culture match here, and I'm going to look for the money somewhere else. And they parted company, which I think was a good thing to do.
Sounds like the right thing to do.
Sure, so you see this all the time in your job where people overstep the mark.
Yes, so it's about making sure there's an alignment with your investors before the investment. And then, as you said, once you have a board, maybe using the chairman of the board and making sure that that's the person that helps to keep the house in order, quote unquote. Another question, Mary, is about passive investors. What do you do when a board seat is taken by somebody who is not delivering as a board investor? What can you do?
Again, you talk to your chairman about having them swapped out for somebody that's going to be more useful, or you just accept that they, that you're carrying a few passengers on your board, but it isn't useful, particularly if you're in high growth stage. You want those board seats. You don't want a great big board. You want it small, and you want the people on there to be agile, useful, up to date, industry specific, all of the things that you need.
Yes, so, absolutely. If I can complement what you just said, Mary, I think part of it is making sure that actually people can see whether or not you have prepared your participation in a board. But I also see an increasing number of teams very quickly, even in seed rounds, putting together boards where they actually have working groups about different things, commercial strategy, pricing strategy, etc. And then when you start having working groups, it becomes a bit more obvious that someone is just not present, not delivering, etc. And it's also a way sort of highlight to the person that they might not be in the right position.
Yeah.
How do you?
Startups
sorry,
don't
Mary.
tend to be polite places. Generally, everybody can be a little bit short and a little bit brusque, perhaps, with each other. But investors, because you're trading, you've a trading relationship with them where they're putting money into your company. People are perhaps tread on eggshells with them a little bit more, so they do extend a little bit more politeness to them. But I think there will come a day when they would say, "This isn't what I need."
So Florence actually has a question about alignment of interests between investors and founders. How do you keep interests aligned, especially when you're preparing a new funding round or potential exits?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and I'm not sure that I can actually answer that, Claire, and I might just flip it across to you because I think you can probably answer this better than I can.
Well, my experience is that any new funding round or potential exit in the best scenario is prepared quite in advance by boards where the investors are usually represented. So this is the ideal scenario. You are sitting on a board, you're representing a group of investors, and you have a team that prepares well their board. So obviously the question of fundraising or strategic investment or potential exit comes up early. And I think the way that the interest can be aligned is by being fully transparent about motivations of the team. That's the first thing. And if you have good communication, we mentioned it earlier, at the board level, then it helps. I think the second thing is probably the interest should have been aligned in the shareholder agreement that was signed when the investment was made. We spend quite a lot of time at Be Angels helping our members actually look very carefully at shareholder agreements when they invest to make sure that interests stay aligned across different rounds of financing or when there's a potential exit. So
that's a very good point, actually, Claire. Yeah. You do often see, as a company grows in later stages, shareholders agreements that are not aligned, and where the original investors will refuse to go along and change them. And that causes a lot of problems.
Do you have a view on startup mentors, Mary? Startup mentors versus investors, startup mentors with startup investors?
Yeah, I would say to anybody out there who is in a startup or who is about to found a startup, be careful who you take advice from. It's become a very busy space for people to earn a living out of, not just to give their time for free, but there are many startup mentors who get paid for mentoring, and many of them, particularly, and I'm not really having a pop at government-sponsored programs here, but you do see a lot of this in terms of government programs where the mentors, when if you scratch the surface a little bit, they've never actually started a business themselves. And those sorts of people are probably not the ones that you need in the modern, particularly if you're a tech founder, they're probably not the people that you need to help you. So just be careful who you take advice from. And the other thing I would say about that, don't take advice from too many people. That's another mistake that founders sometimes make. They're taking advice from so many people that the advice is at cross purposes to each other. So one person's telling them to cast their net wider, and another person's telling them to focus down and double down on this particular vertical, and the founder ends up just confused and doesn't know who to listen to anymore. So be choosy.
Yes, I couldn't agree more, Mary. I think that we also see that in Belgium, for example, there are now many more structures, organizations helping out. entrepreneurs. And I think that's, as you said, be careful who you take advice from, because sometimes it creates tensions between the mentors and the investors, because on the one hand, you have people who have actually invested cash, and on the other, you have people who are giving advice, and that can be, that can be very difficult to handle. So
it's also difficult if you invest in a company where some of those people that have been involved early doors and have been given advice have been given shares for free. That can be awkward. And this is another little tip, everybody. I have actually seen situations where the investors, including myself, wouldn't put money in until those shares had come back into the company. So that can involve the founder having a very embarrassing conversation with somebody that they've overpromised to.
Absolutely. And we also see this type of situation, which is really difficult. What we try to tell the entrepreneurs, if they are offered sweat equity, is that can lead to tensions with future investors, so that they have to be very careful about what they offer, and that they have to document whatever contribution is made by whatever organization or individual as well, because that might be needed later on. One question.
In two of the companies in my portfolio, I started out as a mentor to them and mentored each of them for perhaps 12 months. And when we came to the end of the mentoring period, we decided that I would put some money in on a mutual agreement. But I didn't just turn around and say to them, "Oh, I'm going to leave now unless you give me some shares," because I just think that's just a really mean way to treat people.
Absolutely. A question: do you think that encouraging more women investors will change the landscape for women founders?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's so needed, and we are moving in the right direction. I even think during COVID, we've seen more support groups for women and angel groups for women seem to be springing up everywhere. I think I might have seen two new ones in the UK just this week, female angels. It's a completely different vibe, and I also think that when you're raising, you should make the effort to try and bring some female investors in, because for all the reasons that Florence talked about in her previous workshop, just getting the balance and having that balance on your board and everything's really, really important.
Yes. One question about probably impact investing. What are your views, or what is your advice to startups who want to reconcile business growth and impact?
Well, I only invest in tech for good projects, so I would classify myself as an impact investor. I'm never going to invest in anything that's not improving the planet in some way or improving life in some way.
So how do you make sure that your investors don't slowly drift the focus of the reporting on the business KPIs, and that you still have a focus on impact?
I don't know how in Ireland and the UK there's quite a distinct separation between companies that are social enterprises and companies that are profit with purpose. Mm-hmm. And there's it's quite clear to see the difference. And the ones that I invest in are profit with purpose. So it's about making money and having a profitable business, but it's also about doing something that's good. Yeah, I think for raising investment, you need to work harder to find those investors. Actually, there aren't as many. And do you see that in your world, Claire?
Well, I think that it goes back to finding the right investors. So I think those who will put impact first, although they also want a return on their investment. So I think that, again, finding the right investors is important. Because once you have this alignment of interest with your investors, then you can settle on what exactly you're going to report on in the business development. So how much importance do you give to some KPIs and others? So I think it goes back again to finding the right investors to support your business.
And that really is, and I think that both of us are completely agreed on this. there's a lot of homework for founders to do in terms of identifying appropriate investors who are going to be the people that really do help them get that takeoff and scale their business quickly. And there's no getting around. It takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of energy, and you need to be prepared to do that.
So two questions that are close to what we've just discussed about a mentor becoming an investor. Is that, do you see any ethical issues in doing so, or rather what should you pay attention to if you're a startup and your mentor says, well, now I'm going to invest? And it's related to that other question in the chat about what do you think of accelerator programs taking sweat equity against advice? So this is all related, but what should entrepreneurs pay attention to?
I think if you're in a mentoring relationship with somebody, and it is a longer term mentoring relationship, it's not just that you had a couple of coffees and it lasted for 2 weeks. I think you will understand what value they're going to bring to you and whether that value is going to extend beyond the next 6 or 12 or 18 months. So that's one of the things that you should probably try and balance up there. I think it is tricky about whether or not you give away sweat equity, and I probably wouldn't advise people to do this. You really do need to think about the investors that are coming along later. And it is, honestly, it's very embarrassing when your new investors or your potential investors tell you that they want you to go back and take shares back off family members or other people that have been involved in your business really, really early. And that will happen if your investors, particularly when you get to the point of taking in VCs and whatever, they will go through your cap table and they will tell you who they don't want on there and who they see as not adding value. Sorry, Claire, the accelerators. I would be wary of accelerators that take equity for you just being part of their scene. There are so many options available to founders today and so many offers out there. And I think during COVID, we've seen a lot of different ways that people can access support and resources. So exhaust all of these before you hand over your 30% or whatever it is that they ask for perhaps a very small amount of money. Just be a savvy shopper.
Yes, but take the time to benchmark properly the market and look at what value these people bring, whether it be mentors and investors. You mentioned it, Mary. You also have to do your due diligence on investors, accelerators, whoever is going to help you along the way. You should do proper due diligence and see what they bring to the table and what are the conditions and whether you align with the philosophy, the investment philosophy, on top of
Yeah, I mean, the reality is, and I think this is something that you will see a lot, Claire, the reality is you're going to be together a long time. Your relationship as an investor and a founder is going to last longer than many marriages do. You'll be together a long time. You might be together, you could be together for 5 years, you could be together for 7 years, it might be longer. And so it's important that you spend time getting to know each other, building a relationship, building trust, and finding out if you actually like each other and can work together. Those things are really important. I saw the founder of Onfido speak at an event the other day, and he said that when he was looking at comparing investment funds, he didn't go with the highest valuation, actually. He chose a lower valuation, but a group of investors that he thought he would be able to work better with. So, everything's up for grabs.
Absolutely. I'm looking at the time, Mary, and we are nearly close to the end of this session. Mary, I'd like you to talk to me about Awaken Up.
Awaken Hub.
Yes, Awaken Hub, your community of women founders. Can you tell us more about this initiative and how this integrates into the ecosystem?
It's a COVID project, actually, Claire, that 4 of us who are 4 Irish women, 2 from Northern Ireland and 2 from Southern Ireland, we kicked it off in July this year. It's very Ireland focused, but female founders from other countries would be more than welcome to come along to our events. And we've just started to hold monthly events where we source speakers and we promote people getting to know each other from different parts of Ireland and beyond, as a way of supporting women. And we probably are going to look at some sort of an investment club that will eventually hang off the back. We think that it's time to change the way that women invest in other women and to bring more options to the table, so that you don't have to have €10,000 or whatever it is to get started with in investment. I'd love to see thousands and thousands more women participating in investing in and supporting other women and mentoring them too. So much talent that sits in the corporate world that we don't really have an opportunity to tap into, and maybe there's a way of like bridging those worlds and bringing people closer together. So that's what we're doing.
And is it for women who have already set up a business, or
a lot of our members probably are just thinking,
yes, there are some people probably on this call who maybe have ideas to do the same thing in their own country, or so just trying to understand a little bit better.
Yeah, they should come and talk to us, and we'll give them our playbook. But yes, a lot of it is women that are perhaps have got a good idea. They've maybe done a 6-week part-time online accelerator where they've qualified their idea and they've done a bit of customer discovery, and they're trying to find other women and other people that they could collaborate with, or that they could join forces with, or that they could come together and have a complementary offer with. So I think that space is really interesting. And sure, what else would you be doing? Watching Netflix? No.
Sure, but that's a really interesting initiative.
And it's a social enterprise. It's not for profit. Yeah.
But it's interesting that this was set up also during COVID, because obviously there were a lot of very interesting initiatives and lots of energy and enthusiasm from entrepreneurs and angel investors to sort of continue supporting the ecosystem and just adding value in different ways.
Yeah. Do you think the world will go back to the traditional like investor meetings and where they meet the entrepreneurs, or do you think that it will be a mix from now going on?
I'm convinced it will be a mix, where whenever we start again having a sort of quote unquote normal life. I think that digitalization, especially for the early stage investment world, wasn't a bad thing. It probably forced us to accelerate a number of things. So for example, having online pitches, which, when you're an angel investor, it's so important to meet the entrepreneur face to face, and it's never more than 1 or 2 hours drive, and because the gut feeling is important. But what we realized, actually, we could probably do hybrids where people who want to come because they actually want to talk to the other investors, and they're not only there to see the pitches, they're also there to meet other members of the community, their peers, and talk about deals and talk about CEOs and
Absolutely.
talk about exits. And then you can have people joining in online. I think for us, we've seen, I actually have an investment event tonight where we have 115 investors who will connect. And we have a growing number from Luxembourg or north of France. So actually this has made possible the participation of people outside of Belgium, just because it was too difficult for them to drive historically to our pitches. So I think that it will be a hybrid probably, but in the end, angel investing is so much about getting along with the team and having that fit, that although you can do a certain number of meetings online, I think, meeting actually your the company, the founders, is still important, and meeting your fellow co-investors is still going to be important.
Yeah, although I will let you into a little secret. I have invested myself over the summer into a company where I know the other investors, but I haven't met the founders apart from online. Yes,
because you're co-investing with people probably, which is something different, which is I think you can do. It really depends on, and you mentioned it, Mary, at the beginning. Sometimes you are active and you're a board member because these are probably the deals that are closer to your home. And it goes back to your motivation of, rolling your sleeves up and having an active role. And sometimes you have a nice deal where some investors that are going in the deal and you just want to co-invest. You're probably going to be less active, which is fine. It's part of a portfolio strategy.
It's such an important point, though, for any women in the audience that are thinking about raising. Don't ever forget that investment is a team sport. Nearly always, the person that you're talking to will bring other investors in that are their friends that they invest with, or you get dragged along to invest in companies that your friends are investing in. So it's a team sport. Be very careful that you don't never offend anybody. It's a small world, isn't it, Claire?
Sure. And we always say also, although your friends call you up to join in the deal, don't forget to do your due diligence.
Yes.
Right. So, but Mary, I'm looking at the time. We have to wrap up this session because I think this is going to be in a couple of minutes, the closing session with the plenary. So I'd like to thank you so much, Mary, for your time this afternoon. It was really delightful and insightful to have this conversation with you. Thank you so much to all the participants and for all your questions and comments in the chat. We look forward to continuing the conversation with you on the WEgate platform, on LinkedIn or Twitter. I saw, Mary, that you have a Twitter. So
I do have a Twitter, yes. I'm very active on Twitter. I find it a very good way to meet people and transact some conversations. So yes, please do connect with me.
Okay. Well, thank you so much.